Adam Alcoholic.
Ralph Alcoholic.
Welcome everybody. Anybody that might be trying this right in the middle. We've done all of the chapters up to the second to last paragraph in chapter 5. So some people have written inventory, some haven't. One of the ways that we go through the book with my home group is we turn statements into questions, directing the questions at the person we're working with. I'm just going to recap this part of the book up to the second paragraph, the second to last paragraph. Bear with me if you've done all this already, but if you're new, these are the questions that typically I might ask a newcomer when I'm going to bring him into a fifth step. Looking at these questions, did I make a list of people, institutions, and principles with whom I was angry? Did I go back through my life? Was I honest and thorough? When I was finished, did I consider it carefully? These are just very, very specific questions that I might go through looking at the resentment inventory, the relationship inventory, and the fear inventory. So do I believe that it was apparent to the world and that quite often that people were quite wrong, and to conclude that others are wrong was as far as I ever got? Do I see that as I go through the inventory? Was the usual outcome that people continue to wrong me and I stayed sore? Okay. Do I believe that the more I fought to try to have my own way, this is the exertion of self-will, the worse matters got? Am I able to see that? Is it plain to me that a life that includes deep resentment only leads to futility and unhappiness? Am I able to see that? Is my hope the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience? I mean, it's a very, very important question. If an alcoholic can't see that when he stops drinking, or she, that the outsides get better, but the insides get worse, this isn't going to make sense, because if alcohol is the problem, the solution is abstinence. But if the greater spiritual problem here has to do with my relationship conduct, my resentment, and my fear, then the solution has to be spiritual. Until I really understood that second piece, that the first half of step 1 is me defending my right to drink, the rest of the program is me defending my right to play God, me trying to arrange life to suit myself, and my deep-seated expectations that I start to see now really are resentments. I'm going to start to see it. Do I believe this business of resentment is infinitely grave? Okay. Have I found that these resentments are fatal? It's an important question to ask a new person. For when harboring such feelings of resentment, do I shut myself off from the sunlight of the spirit? Can I see that? Do I believe the insanity of alcohol will return and I will drink again? In other words, I'm going to default to drinking if I don't find a spiritual way of life. Do I believe that for me to drink is to die? That may or may not be your truth. It might be a spiritual death. Do I believe that if I'm to live, I have to be free of anger? Can I see that? Do I believe the grouch and the brainstorm are poison for me? And then going into the fear inventory, there's a couple more questions and then we're going to start. But I think these are all very important questions. Do I believe that the world and its people really dominated me? Do I believe in that state the wrongdoing of others had the power to actually kill me? Do I believe that I can escape these resentments? Do I believe these resentments must be mastered? It's very, very important that I see this. Have I realized that people who wronged me were also perhaps spiritually sick? This is a huge piece of the inventory. And the only way I could prove that statement was asking myself, everywhere I had a resentment, was I capable of the same behavior? If I resent someone for gossiping, did I gossip? If I resent someone for stealing, did I steal? If I resent a parent for emotionally abandoning me, did I abandon everyone I loved when I was drinking? So I'm starting to look at it from a different angle now. Although I did not like the symptoms and the way they disturbed me, like this is column 3, like myself, was I also sick too? Very important question. Do I believe I must avoid retaliation or argument? This is all a process of concession in the 4th step. I have to concede these things. Do I believe that if I don't avoid, I will destroy my chance of being helpful? This is leading into the 4th step prayer. Do I believe that God will show me how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one? Very, very difficult question, especially if you were harmed as a child. Referring back to the list, putting out the wrongs others had done, can I resolutely look for my own mistakes? It's another question. Do I see where I was to blame? Do I see the inventory as mine, not the other person's? Have I admitted my wrongs and am I willing to set matters straight? This is alluding to the 8th step. And then continuing a couple more, and then we're going to be done with this. Do I see how fear was an evil and corroding thread? The fabric of my existence was shot through with it. This is something I'm going to look at when I look at the difficulties. Have I noticed the word fear is bracketed alongside my difficulties with Mr. Brown in the third column, referring back to that example? Am I able to see it, admit it, and acknowledge it with another human being? These are all going to be components of my fears. Did I put them on paper? These are important questions. If somebody hasn't done this, my experience is that they're shortchanging them. Did I ask myself why I had them? So when I do the inventory, I ask myself all the way through this, why I have the fear. I fear being in pain because I don't want to drink. Why do I fear drinking? Because I don't want to die, and so forth. Each fear has a cause and a reason behind it. So do I believe self-reliance was as good as far as it went? Do I believe self-confidence can't solve the fear problem? Another question. Do I believe there must be a better way? Do I believe that I never have to apologize for depending on God? Very interesting. And so there's a lot of questions here. I can't go through all of them right now, but the last one, the last page of questions I'll read, relationship inventory. Do I believe that no one should judge my sex conduct? Do I believe we all have sex problems? We'd hardly be human if we didn't. Another question. Have I reviewed my conduct in the past years? Okay, did I get this all down on paper and look at it? These are yes or no questions. When I go through this with a sponsee, I want to see if he's been complete on this stuff. Okay? Have I tried to shape a sound and sane sex ideal for my future sex life? Did I subject each relationship to the test of these questions? Did I ask God to mold my ideals? Okay. Do I believe the right answer will come if I want it? Do I believe I must avoid hysterical thinking? And that's pretty much, and these are the most important ones, I think. Do I believe if sex or relationships are troublesome, I must throw myself harder into helping others? I've seen more people drink behind relationships than almost anything, including. So those are the questions up to where we are now. And then the last paragraph, the questions are going to be in this paragraph. Ralph, do you want to start now with
Sure.
Brad? Unless you have anything to say about all that?
Sure. My name is Ralph Alcoholic. I just want to say
It took about 8 minutes.
I could sit here and listen to Phyllis read how it works all day, Phyllis. That was awesome. All right. So, and what in regards to what Adam was saying again, that goes to before, during, and after those resentments. What was our role? It's a deeper dive, that we painted certain signals green when they should have been red from the start. It's a big time awareness. So from the bottom of page 70, if we've been thorough about our personal inventory, that's a question mark. Have I been thorough? We've written down a lot. We've listed and analyzed our resentments. Have I listed and analyzed our resentments? We began to comprehend their futility and their fatality. Another question mark. Have we commenced to see their terrible destructiveness? We began to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill towards all men and our enemies, for we will look them as sick people. And then I have written next to that, they like ourselves were sick. When I have that attitude that they like ourselves were perhaps spiritually sick, it takes me from like looking down upon them as them being a sick person, just like I was in most cases. We listed the people we've hurt by our conduct. Have I listed them? Are we willing to straighten them out the past if we can? Another question mark. And here's the big consideration. If you read this again and again, you'll find that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are convinced that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him. And up until this point, you don't have to understand the steps to do them. However, you do have to do them to understand them. And up until this point, you might not be convinced of that. But this is where you have to keep moving and keep trying to develop that relationship and doing these prayers and doing the things that are going to be happening. This chapter is called Into Action. It's from 72 to 89. It's 17 pages and 7 steps. So it's a lot of action. So the question is, do I believe that God can remove whatever has blocked you off from him? If you've made a decision, that's step 3, and an inventory of your grossly handicaps, that's step 4, you've made a good beginning. That being so, you swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself? Adam?
As much as these questions seem difficult and I was droning on about it, when I came into 6 and 7, I had what people say 6 and 7 are one paragraph. The reason is because when I came to my sponsor at this point, I had all this information that I'd written down. I'd looked at the list of resentments. I'd looked at my esteem, my pride, my security, my personal relations, my sex relations. I looked at all of those specific things, including pocketbook, and I'd done that for each resentment. I looked at the flip side of that, and I'd matched up with each of those lists where I'd been selfish, an attitude that I can do whatever I want and not pay the consequences. I looked at the lie I had told myself, whatever. Every resentment, I had to tell myself some kind of lie, either that their love for me should have been more powerful, or I could change them. Each and every one of these instances. So when conduct inventory, I had a lot of information. I had a lot of material. It wasn't like I could have written this down. Pretty big binder of stuff. And when I went through those questions that I just read, and the questions that Ralph just read, I had every one of these. I had actually executed all of those actions. And one of the things my sponsor said to me, he said, how free do you want to be? You want to be free enough to survive this. And what I didn't understand about this, and I'll close with this last statement, is until I really started to understand the application of 10, all of this information here was going to show me how to really sail through 10 and 11 with a kind of understanding that would get me free of this stuff very quickly. It would show me how to face and be rid of these resentments very, very quickly. So it almost became, like he says in the 10-step promises, automatic, powerful. So for me, I had to dot every I, had to cross every T in this part of the book. And if you notice, this is where we start losing people, because sometimes people use these workshops as a way to, they want to hear about it, but when it came to the writing, I had to sit down and do the writing. And for me, if you're stuck with this, you might find like what we call a step guide in our group, or a coach that can help you to get these inventory processes down so you can see it and be rid of it. Ralph?
Adam, you crushed it there. And regarding Adam added in those extra things about ambitious or self-esteem or any of those other things, those other points of view. It's okay if you're writing and you're following the directions and you don't see that. If you have a good sponsor or someone who's taking you through this work, he'll be able to point this stuff out to you at that time when we're going to get into this. Now we're going to start talking about step 5. A lot of people think that step 5 is just hearing the inventory. There's a lot of specific directions here and a lot of warnings before you do it. Okay, starting on the top of page 72. Having made a personal inventory, what shall we do about it? We've been trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator and discover the obstacles in our path. We're trying to clear away the path to get a closer relationship with our higher power. We have admitted certain defects, ? Have I ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is? ? We have put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out, or rid of, if you would. This requires action on our part, which when completed will mean you have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. Like Adam said last week and the week before, we know everything about column 1, 2, and 3 normally when we come in. But sharing, and probably our higher power knows, but when we share this inside stuff and get to look at it from a different point of view, we start to change. We start to be willing to get rid of these things, this game plan for life that we've been running on that has been causing us to have failures in all areas of our life. This brings us to the 5th step in our program of recovery, mentioning in the preceding chapters. This is perhaps difficulty, especially when discussing our defects with another person. Is it difficult for you to discuss personal inventory with someone? We think we have done well in admitting these defects to ourselves. I just said that. There is no doubt about it that in actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We will be more reconciled in discussing ourselves with another person when we see the good reasons why we should do so. The best reason, and here it's going to list a bunch of reasons and warnings. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep themselves certain facts about their lives, trying to avoid this humbling experience. They have turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reasons are they never completed their house cleaning. They took their inventory all right, but they hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egotism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves, but they had not learned enough humility, fearlessness, and honesty. In a sense, we find it necessarily until they told someone else their life story. Adam?
Well, the short version is if you don't do a fifth, you'll probably drink one. We've all heard that. But there's a lot more here. And one of the things is on page 25, it says, none of us like the leveling of our pride, the soul searching and the confession of shortcomings that the process requires for its successful consummation. If you've noticed, they'll let anybody into AA. The only requirement is a desire to stop drinking. But on page 25, it talks about now these requirements. And part of this has to do with the leveling of my pride. I'll tell you right now, if there's a name for it, if you're ashamed of some of this stuff, if there's a name for it, someone else has done it. If there's a law against it, a lot of people have done it. And I think the most powerful 3 words in the fifth step are, yeah, me too. I felt like that. I go to a therapist, I tell them all this stuff, and they're like, how did that make you feel? I go to an AA member, and they're like, you did that too? It's like we have this thing that we share with each other. And, guilt is that I made a mistake. Shame is that I am a mistake. Guilt comes from the outside. Shame comes from the inside. In 1939, they didn't use words like shame, enabling. They didn't use words like boundaries. But I guarantee you that you're going to start to see a lot of these things not only exposed, but healed in this part of the book. One of the things that I think is very important here is that if you notice the fifth step, when we read the 12 steps, it says admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. If you look at it here, it says something totally different. It says, this will mean we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our defects. First paragraph, chapter 6. So what I came to understand is the word defect, if you look at it, it's interchangeable with the word wrong. So now when I'm in 10, I continue to take personal inventory, and when I'm in defect, I'm not just looking for the wrongs I've done others. I'm starting to look for the defect in my thinking. I'm going to look at this attitude, which I've learned in the 4-step. An attitude typically for me is, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. Or I can do whatever I want and not pay the consequences. Somehow I go through life feeling that the rules don't apply to me. So now I'm going to start to watch for this defect. We're going to hit this again when we hit 10. I start to see the defect of dishonesty, which Ralph just said. Somehow I start to speak a language called victimese. And whatever that is, it's a way that I paint the red flags green. The resentment is my attachment, and it's a faulty emotional attachment to people, places, and things. And the last piece is fear. But now when we look at it, the exact nature, the word nature means origin. From the point of fear, which is agnosticism, all fear is agnosticism, you will see all these defects start to come out. When the 12 and 12 was written, they used the 7. They used pride, anger, greed, gluttony, lust, envy, sloth. But all of those originate from fear, and all of them are fight, flight, or freeze, which are part of the human condition. Fight is resentment, flight is fear, and freeze is camouflage. It is dishonesty. I use dishonesty when I can't do the other two. It's very, very simplistic. It said the inventory is either I want to kill it, sleep with it, or eat it. Kill it is resentment, sleep with it is sex, and eat it is fear. Look at it. It's so simple. It is all part of the limbic part of the brain. So all this stuff that Ralph just talked about, very, very powerful, but it all comes down to 3 words. Yeah, me too. If you come at this with love and kindness and helpfulness with another human being, there's something magical that happens here. Admission, acknowledgement with another human being, and acceptance of these huge chunks of truth about myself. And from that begins the process of healing, if that makes any sense. Ralph?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. And One thing it talks about is as I get out in front of us, when it is time to get to it, is I tell them a little about my story. And what I heard another speaker say a few years ago is to if you ask them to briefly tell me about your father's story or your mother's story, and this helps them try and give a little forgiveness in their own life. It's kind of a cool exercise to do. Adam, why don't you take this next paragraph? It's powerful.
Absolutely. More than most people, the actor leads a double life. He is very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. Okay, this is very powerful. In psychology, they talk about three selves: the perceived self, the projected self, and the actual self. And if you really look at it, when we look at the perceived self, it is esteem. The projected self is pride. The more disparity or incongruency between the projected self and the perceived self, the more spiritual pain I have. I know that's a psychological measure, but really it's very simple here. And he's going to say it in the next paragraph. The inconsistency between these selves is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. Now, I might do these things sober, which is even worse. And the thing about Al-Anon is like, they don't really have an excuse like drinking. They can do this behavior without drinking, right? Coming to his senses, he is revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. I might even remember all of them. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles on thinking someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. He hopes that they will never see the light of day. He is under constant fear and tension. That makes for more drinking. Now, again, some people may actually do this sober. Just saying. Ralph?
Yeah, it's so true. I suffer from something really stupid. You'll never see me at an AA meeting late, because here's what I think. I think when that door opens and I walk through that door and that door creaks and people are going to look at me and go, oh my God, he's almost 20 years sober and he's late for a meeting. Why is he late? That is that is so stupid. I know nobody cares, but that is a mindset that I still suffer from. Like, I'm that important that you people think that. Or it's like when someone's in a meeting and they say, well, I'm sorry I was late, but I had to do this. Dude, nobody cares. Like, but that's all part of self. Myself, self-absorbed. So psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We have spent thousands of dollars for self-examination. And I asked, have you gone to a shrink? We know that few instances where I've given these doctors a fair break. Have you given doctors a fair break? Do we tell them the truth? We have seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. Sounds true to me. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we are honest with no one else, including ourselves. Small wonder why in the medical profession have a low opinion of alcoholics and their chance of recovery. And if you remember reading the doctor's opinion, Dr. Silkworth said the same thing. It goes on to clarify with a must. We must be entirely honest with someone if we are expect to live long and happily in this world. Do I believe that's the truth? Again, this is before we're taking the fifth step. This is directions to give to your sponsee when going through the work. Rightly and naturally, again, that word naturally that Adam described, we think well before choosing the person or persons till we take this intimate and confident step. And I stop and I say, well, JP, up until this point, are you comfortable moving on with this? You've done all the work. You've told me a lot of stuff already, but you make sure that they're comfortable and you let them know that whatever you share with me, no one else will ever hear it. If they hear it, they hear it from you. This part of the relationship, the sponsor relationship, is so important that there's that trust factor. And what I do is I share some of my fifth steps, some of my craziness that I've done before I was sober and after I was sober. Again, touching on the Me Too statement. There's nothing that, no one's ever told me that I didn't hear before. It's just how it is. I don't know how it is for the women, but for the men, it basically comes down to two things. Those that have had sex with farm animals and those that haven't. It's supposed to be a joke. If it was in a room, you guys might laugh a little. Wow. Those of us, there's another specific direction. Those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires confession must, and of course will want to go to a properly appointed authority who's duly noted to receive it. So that just says if you're a member of a Catholic church and you're going that route, perhaps you want to have them hear your fifth step in addition to you, just to maybe get a different spiritual perspective. Though if we have no religious connection, we must still well to talk with someone ordained or by an established religion. We often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. Of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. Adam?
We've come a long way since 1939. And my experience with this has a lot to do with transparency and accountability and getting someone to trust you on this stuff is very hard. I've used I know you guys heard me say this before, but it's a simplistic kind of analogy of this. It's like going into a haunted house. You go into a haunted house the first time, it's frightening. Have you ever been to a really good haunted house like in Vegas or Knott's Berry Farms or one of these big, you fall through a trap door, you step on a button and a goblin falls out of the ceiling. I mean, you can have a heart attack in a really good haunted house. But the question is this: what if you got to go through the haunted house the second time? What if you got to go through the haunted house the third time? Now, there's typically 5 things I see in inventory. I have a severe emotional overreaction to abandonment, rejection, betrayal, disrespect, and authority. And every one of those 5 things are predicated by fear. And I'm blindsided by it. Fear of abandonment, fear of betrayal, right? Fear of rejection, fear of disrespect, fear of authority. So what happens if you get to go through that haunted house the 4th or 5th time? You can build it. You start to see how it was put together. Suddenly you see the mechanics behind it. And it's almost like being the Wizard of Oz. What would it be like now, after having all that experience, to be able to hold a newcomer's hand and walk them through that haunted house? And every one of those experiences that we've had the privilege of hearing from other people, some of us got molested, some of us got abandoned, some of us were emotionally brutalized, some of us were loved too much. I mean, you hear that. They were smothered, but any way you look at it, having the experience of being able to walk through these things over and over again, I think we've come a long way since 1939. And I've seen step guides and I've met people that have had a lot of experience with this, that will walk people through these things on retreats and in step workshops. And it's absolutely amazing. And I'm not to say that some guy that's never heard a 5th step before can't give you comfort and understanding and insight. But I think at the same time, I had the real luck, just pure luck, of getting around some people that had done a lot of inventory work with many, many people. And they walked me through this and it changed my life. I mean, after 28 treatment centers, I'm 22 and a half years away from a drink. And, I know now that this was very, very powerful. This part of the book, it's a privilege, if you're new, to be able to walk through a 5th step with someone and just walk through it with them, help them. You will learn and develop this as you go along, but you will be one of those people from doing a workshop like this that can walk somebody through a 5th step and help them with this. You don't have to be an expert, but it is kind of cool to have a little experience with it, and you will develop that. And I'll give my number. Ralph's got a number. We'll help anybody here that needs additional information on this. We will walk you through this. Thanks.
Matt, you want to do it? Rodney, somebody?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's Matthew. Just wanted to, again, just make a quick note that we have a link there for the 7th tradition. So if you have a way of transferring to support all the various levels of service, please find it in the chat. Thanks. We'll get back to you guys.
Okay. If we cannot, or would rather not do this, we search out acquaintance for a close mouth, understanding friend. Again, when this was written, usually when you're reading this with the sponsor, that's usually the person who does this. Perhaps our doctor or psychiatrist would be the person. It may be one of our own family, but we cannot disclose anything to our wives or parents, which will still hurt them or make them unhappy. We have no right to save our own skin at the other person's expense. You're going to hear that again in a couple pages later. Such parts of our story will tell someone who will understand yet be affected. It's very, very important that they're going to understand what we're doing, that this is a life and death errand. The rule is we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. Notwithstanding the great necessity for discussing ourselves with someone, and maybe someone so situated there is no one suitable person for this available. Again, that's not my experience now. If that is so, this step may be postponed. Only, however, if we hold ourselves in complete readiness to go through with it the first opportunity. Again, the only thing I might have in this is some people who are locked up, maybe in prison or whatever, but even then they could seek out a closed-mouthed friend. We say this because we are very anxious that we talk to the right person. You know, John, are you very excited? Are you very anxious to talk to the right person? It is important that anybody be able to keep a confidence that he will fully understand and approve what we are driving at, that he will not try to change our plan, and we must not use this as a mere excuse to postpone. When we decide who it is to hear our story, waste no time. We have written an inventory, prepared for a long talk. Are you prepared for a long talk? We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. This is the sponsee. He should realize that we are engaged in a life and death errand. Again, this is written that the sponsee is realizing this to who he's telling this, that he must realize that this is a life and death errand. Most people who approach us in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. Adam, take it from there. We pocket our pride.
Yeah, I just want to throw something in. I was just thinking about this while you were reading this. In chapter 4, it says, face with alcoholic destruction or to live on a spiritual basis, right? It doesn't say face with alcoholic destruction or stop drinking. It doesn't say go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of my intolerable situation, or stop drinking. So now you're talking about an answer. We're talking about a spiritual answer. If alcohol is the problem, the solution is abstinence. We are at a place now where, people will say AA is not about not drinking, but I guarantee you that if I do not walk through this door, I may stay stopped for a significant amount of time, but I will never be free. I didn't understand that this is such a powerful door. These are the 5th step promises. I'm going to go through these really quickly. We pocket our pride and go to it. Okay, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Okay, and it asks me, I have stop right here until I'm ready. Once we have taken this step, all right, walk through this door, withholding nothing. Have I taken this step? Am I withholding nothing? We are delighted. These are promises. We can look the world in the eye. Okay, we can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Wow, how powerful is that? We talk about the 9th step promises. Look at these promises and look at the 10th step promises where it says we've ceased fighting anyone or anything. Our fears fall from us. It's suggesting that I do not have to live in fear the rest of my life. Okay? We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. Very, very powerful. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs. Now we begin to have a spiritual experience. A lot of people don't feel this the first time through, but I think over a period of time, it develops for a lot of us. And you can go back to the spiritual experience in the 3rd appendices and look at it from the educational variety, a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. It may not be that impactful. If it's not that impactful the first time through your inventory, do not be discouraged. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. Okay, we feel we are on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. This is very, very powerful for a lot of us. I remember that first, when I look back and I still have my first 4 step, I've been carrying around resentments for 20 years. I've been carrying this stuff around for 20 years. It was so broken in me and so stale. And to let that stuff go with somebody that could say, yeah, me too. I felt like that too. I know what that's like. And to realize that now, after all these years of doing inventory, if you're new and hearing gay, straight, black, white, young, old, I've heard a lot of it. I'm not bragging. I've just had the privilege of it. They seem to be all the same. Everyone wants to be loved, respected. They want to be part of community. They want to belong to something. It's very, very similar. So those are as we call them, and you might want to write it in your book, the fifth step promises. Ralph, do you have anything to say about this?
No, except I remember the first one that I did, and you know, I went to my sponsor's house. I had 10 days to do it. So mine took a year, 6 months in treatment, and 6 months of going to meetings, and 2 weeks to do. It really took 2 weeks to actually write this and get up to this part. And I can remember that after I shared everything with him, he says, okay, he put the book on a bookshelf. There was a record player next to it. And he said, sit down. And he went to Checkers. He got some food or whatever. And when he came back, I still didn't feel good. But he said, all right, so what'd you leave out? And then I told him about some other things that I had held back on. And then when I did that, I just felt like that I was really a part of it. I was enjoying going to meetings at this part, but I had a situation a few weeks earlier where I almost drank because I was full of rids. I was restless, irritable, and discontent. Everything was going my way for a while, and then it wasn't. But so I really, after doing this, I didn't have any big spiritual experience or anything like that, but I felt like I was a part of it, and I was ready to move on. And when we get to this part, I work with hundreds of people. When we get to this part in the book, it's like, okay, so this is it. Do you want to get better or don't you? Do you want to do the rest of the work or we don't you? Because now you wrote it down, you admitted it to God, to yourself, and to someone else, and now we're looking at it. And here's the deal. Do you want to do the rest of the work or you don't? And that's what we're going to be getting into next. 6 and 7, very, very powerful. Returning home, we find a place where we could sit quiet for an hour. Here's directions. Carefully reviewing what we have done. We thank God from the bottom of our hearts that we know him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, if we have omitted anything, left out. For building an arch through which we could walk a free man. And this is, we started with the keystone a long time ago. And is our work solid so far? Do I admit that I'm powerless over alcohol, drunk or sober, and my life is unmanageable? Do I believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity? And again, we're talking about the insanity of that first drink. Have I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him? Have I made this searching and fearless moral inventory? And have I shared my whole life story with someone? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skipped on the cement, put cement into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? These are all questions about the step work we've done up until this point. Adam?
It's really interesting because I was questioned a lot on why so much detail. And a couple things happened to me. One is I was in Akron, Ohio when I had 4 years sober at a workshop in a basement with 2 old guys. And I had done the inventory very detailed, like we explained it in this workshop, with an extended 3rd and 4th column. And they were doing this on the blackboard, writing the long form of esteem, the long form of pride, the long form of security, what I need, and how that conflicts with my belief system. And these 2 old guys were doing it exactly the same way. And they said that they'd been doing the inventory like this since the 40s. And it was so empowering because going through this and looking at these questions coming out of the 5th step, we talk about the cornerstone on page 47, the keystone on page 62, but the word that comes up here was, we talk about precisely how we have recovered. And my sponsor said, there's not a lot of latitude for opinion in the word precisely. Ask a craftsman what precisely means. And if this is too detailed for anybody that's listening to this, my sponsor had said to me very clearly, how free do you want to be? Do you want to be free enough to survive this? And for me, the kind of mind that I have that holds on to the details, like I said, I know what my 4th grade teacher was wearing. I can remember every detail from 5th, 6th, 7th grade. I can still recite all my teachers' names all the way through high school, every single one of them. I just have that kind of brain. So for me, I hold on to resentment. I attach to it. And what this process did here is going through these proposals and looking at this stuff. For the first time in my life, I was able to let a lot of that go. The resentments against my mom and dad, the resentments against my school teachers, the resentments against the first love of my life, all that stuff now. My relationship conduct, my ideas that when we say relieve me of the bondage of self, these are chains that bind my spirit. And this was a part of the process where I was able to be rid of it, not completely, but to let it go enough Like that's that thing when you tell a little kid, go in your room and straighten out your room, and he doesn't want to do it. And you'd say that same young man, go in your room and throw out all your old stuff and we'll buy you new stuff. And that kid would be in there in 2 minutes. And what happened now, I was able to let go of these huge chunks of truth about myself. This is the part now where they're going to be cast out. You wait till the next page. And when we say 6 and 7 are just a couple paragraphs, it's because if I've done precisely what the book has said up to now, I have a lot of information. And that sponsor is going to walk me through a door now, an arch to which I'm going to become free for the first time in my life. I'm going to become free, and then it's going to give me a purpose. So powerful. If you've missed anything up to now, when my sponsor on page 75, he said, stop now and go back and do the writing and call one of us and let us walk you through it. Okay? Otherwise, this is just a bunch of theory. And it says the spiritual life is not a theory. Okay? Thank you. Ralph?
Yeah, and this transformation starts to feel weird. Like when you feel the sun, when you haven't been in the sun for a while, it feels good, but it almost feels like alarming. Like, is this supposed to be happening? You got to just keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. Okay, here's the question. If is a condition. If we have answered to our satisfactions, we then look at step 6. We have emphasized a willingness as being indispensable. Do I believe that my willingness is indispensable? Are we now ready to let God, or I put the person's name there, to let God remove from us all the things which we admitted to be objectionable? And, when I sat down with, in theory, just reading this, it seems kind of complicated, but have just written out the 4-step and started looking at column 4 and 5, and realizing where I'd been selfish, dishonest, and considered afraid, it shouldn't be. Unless I'm holding on to this resentment, unless I'm holding on to, I'm still caught up in fear, it really shouldn't be. Admitted these are objectionable. Can he now take them all? Every one. If we still cling on to something, we will not let go. We ask God, another prayer, to help us be willing. And we start to acting as if, and we start acting the opposite way. So if we're ready entirely, we're looking at these defects, we're looking at all these defects of characters that we had written down in column 4 and 5. We look at those. We ask God to have him help us be willing to have these remove us from us. Root and branch, everything. If that's done, well, Adam, why don't you talk about that before we do the prayer?
Well, at the top of page 76, I have the word remove circled for a reason. When I went back and I looked at what it is, it says selfishness, self-centeredness, that is the root of our trouble. It talks about being driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion. It says there's no way of getting rid of self without God's aid. And it says we must be rid of, again, this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. That piece of the book is going to give you a very clear description. The word rid of is synonymous with remove. It's really foreshadowing in that part of the book what's coming up in the inventory, the selfishness, the self-centeredness, these things where we talk about various forms of self, which is being inconsiderate. It's a big piece here. And that stuff's all going to come out now. I'm going to look at that. I've done it with a sponsor in the 5th step. And now I'm going to sit down with him and I'm going to look at. So the word remove is very, very critical. If you'd like, would you like to stop, or we could go do the 7-step prayer now, right?
Yeah.
Want to do it as a group?
Sure.
Okay. And like I said, if you haven't come, just do it and then go back and do your inventory for next week. So it says, can he now take all of it, every one? If we still cling to something and we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. I highly suggest that when you're doing the review of the first 5 proposals, do the prayer. Just continue to pray that God will remove from you all these things. So let's just do it together. When ready, we said something like this. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and to my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out here and do your bidding. Amen. It says we've now completed step 7. There's this great prayer. It says, God, thank you for everything you've given me. God, thank you for everything you've taken from me. But most of all, God, thank you for what you've left me. And my experience is what's left and what remains is love, is kindness, is friendship. What's left after doing this is purpose, is a power and a process in our lives. It shows me again the things that I've been holding on to that really don't have much value. It shows me what really means something to me in my life. And it's very interesting because sometimes, like we say, our deepest, darkest secrets become the gifts that we can help other people with. I found that to be very, very true. Yeah, me too. Again, this thing where two or more are gathered for the purpose of recovery, the power exists there. And this now is starting to help me to connect with another human being at a really true and simple form. So, Ralph?
Yeah, and my friend Steve L talks about 6 and 7 in this way. He talks about when he had his big house and he had to move into another house, that him and his wife, they went through the house and they had a tag sale and they put everything out, and they said they had a tag sale for a couple of days and they got rid of some of the stuff. And that's step 6, you realizing the stuff is which you didn't want anymore and you want to get rid of. Step 7 is saying, okay, to everyone's there, come take what you want, good and bad, and just get rid of it all, turning it over. And that good and bad, when I said that prayer the first couple of times, my sponsor really emphasized that we're turning all of me over to God, to, good and bad. And the part that Adam was just talking about is on page 124, midway through the page. It says, cling to the thought. It's on 124, the second to last paragraph. It says, cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have, the key to life and happiness for others. With it, you could avert death and misery for others. That's the Me Too. And I don't know why I haven't heard the Me Too in meetings in a long time, but when I think of the 5th step, that's what I think of, Me Too. We have time for some questions. So, Rodney?
Sure, raise your hands and we'll unmute you. Oh, here we got Bob already from Detroit.
Hi, I'm Bob, alcoholic.
Hi, Bob.
Thanks, guys. As always, very thorough. You can never be too thorough for me. I mean, you can go a word up, I appreciate it. I've been through inventories. My first inventory was in 1974. So I've been through a lot of 4 steps and 5th steps and learn something every time I go through it. And sometimes I get too hung up on the words, but let me just ask you guys a question because you've been through this. On page 75, we have written down our inventory and prepared for a long talk. Is it ever wrong to have, talks on several occasions as opposed to one long talk? If it's warranted, as far as you guys know?
I believe it's fine. I believe that's fine. In fact, I'm going to be talking about most people miss stuff. My experience is that most people are going to miss stuff, and we're going to continue to grow and develop that stuff. I mean, there's stuff that came to me much later in my recovery that I needed to go back and clean up. Yeah. Suddenly I realized that I'd approached something from a completely different angle, or I'd misled somebody. And of course, I'll discuss that with my sponsor or step guide, and then come up with a plan of how I'm going to amend that. So of course, there's going to be multiple talks. But I believe the first long talk is going to be the grosser handicaps. But I don't think, none of us are that thorough.
And I think you mentioned earlier in one of the talks as we were going through the 3rd step that there was no amen after the 3rd step, and that the first amen comes after the 7th step, as if it's like one long prayer, or it's
incomplete. It's incomplete. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, guys. I appreciate your thoroughness for sure.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Angela. I think your mic may not be working. We don't hear you. You're definitely unmuted. We'll have to ask you to unmute again. Okay, you're unmuted, so let's see if we can hear you. No, your mic's not working. You can type it in chat and I'll read it out for you. Anybody else with questions?
I have something to say, though.
Okay, Adam.
I think it's very important to understand. If you look what it says here, I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and to my fellows. The removal of 6 and 7 isn't to make me feel better. It's blocking me from being helpful. It's so funny how I'm only going to feel better when my will is aligned with the purpose of being helpful. This isn't a process of making myself feel better. I will feel better by aligning my will. Very interesting. So it's the purpose of removing the defects is so I can be a conduit of God's purpose, helping others, a servant's heart.
And it talks about that on the top of the next page, what our real purpose is.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any more questions?
Wendy.
Yeah. David.
Dave.
Hi, is Wendy going to ask a question first?
Well, we can have Wendy second. It's up to you guys.
Okay. Okay, I'll just go real quick. David, alcoholic. Thank you guys so much for your service and for this workshop and for the group. I'm really getting so much out of this. I identified with it. I have a question. I was identifying with everything both Adam and Ralph were sharing about their 5 steps. I've been taken through the steps. I'm in 10 and 11 now. And I wanted to ask a 2-part question. And it's really, do you think it's more common that people withhold that dark cranny, withholding nothing, and that you have to give them a minute to come around and you sort of see that look as a sponsor? Because I have not heard of a 5th step. But in my situation, I did withhold some things, just some intimate feelings about my parents that I didn't want to share, and some stuff with my kids. And Shelley was taking me through the work, and she could sense it, and she let me sit with it. And we came back to it the next night because we did break it up also over a couple of nights. And she had asked me to consider. And when I came out with those things, I had that relief. And so I understand the importance of that. Do you find that it's more common that people go through that process? Ralph sort of alluded to the same thing in your experience as I heard it. Or do you think that happens enough? And do you have any suggestions for a sponsor in how to sort of cajole that last little bit out of somebody you sense is withholding?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I try to get out in front of it and share some of my 5th step with them. Some of the stuff that I thought, was going to be the end of the world that I would never be able to share with somebody. And if I've done that, and if I'm the ex-problem drinker armed with the facts about myself, and I share, this is what I did, this is how I felt, this is what I'm doing now, that gives them the little relief, the freedom, again, not to hammer home me too, if I say some of that stuff after they share, that's fine. But if I found that if I get ahead of it a little and share some of my 5th step, that doesn't happen as much, but it definitely happens.
Okay, we got Wendy. I guess you had your hand up before, and go ahead.
Yeah, I physically raised it, Rodney.
Yeah.
So anyway, Adam saw it. Thank you, Adam. Wendy, alcoholic from the Black Hills of South Dakota.
Thanks.
And glad to be here as always. My question kind of goes along with David's, but before I ask it, I just want to say, there's only one other person, Adam, that I've heard say that prayer. Thank you for all you've taken from me. Thank you for all you've given me. Thank you for all you've taken from me. But most of all, thank you for all you left me. And Sharon C. is my sponsor from LA. And she got sober in the 70s, and she talks about that. Her sponsor told her to get on her knees, and so she was homeless, and all broken, and in the middle of the night she crawls out of bed because she doesn't want anybody to see her or hear her, and she says that prayer. You are the only other person I've heard you say that. So that's pretty neat. How do you get someone to release all of that pent up secret information? And, I guess I want them to be free, and that's the only way they're going to be free is when they finally let go of it. But boy, that trust is hard sometimes for people. to do that. And it's just, how do you do that? Have them tell their deepest, darkest stuff.
Like Ralph had said, quite often I'll lead with it because the things that I hid from the world for all those years, after 22 years and a lot of inventory, pretty much they're all the same. You know, with men, it's a lot of sexual stuff. It's, you know, certain things that, you know, I don't, those things I've, you know, seen women with, you know, specific things to females. And, you know, all I can do is share my experience with a lot of that shame and a lot of that just these awful things, and leave it up to them. Sometimes they'll come back with it. I do believe there's a difference between compliance and surrender, like Harry Tebow had said. And compliance means cooperation without agreement. And if someone's coming into a fifth step with that type of attitude, you're not going to get all of it. When someone's truly surrendered to this, they'll usually come back. I'll leave an open door. Like Bob had said, a lot of times it's not going to just be one talk. They will come back with it, but I will share with them, you know, some of my personal experience. And I've got a lot of stuff like that in my past that I was really ashamed of, that, you know, I would never tell anybody. And now it's like, I can talk about that. I've talked about it in a step workshop. It's not, you know, it may not be appropriate now, but trust me that almost anything and everything that can happen to a person, you know, I went through, especially before I was 10, 12 years old. So, and it doesn't, my friend said, just because I picked my nose as a 10-year-old, that doesn't make me a nose picker. I played basketball, you know, it doesn't make me a basketball player. A lot of the things that I define myself by because of what had happened to me are just things that happened to me. And I was able to let a lot of that go. One of the magical things about the fifth step is that it goes from being subjective to objective. I'm looking at it now from almost like a third party. Admission, acknowledgement, acceptance with another human being. And I see those are just things that happen. Yeah, me too. I felt like that. I was broken. I was hurt. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it go right now. And I'm going to have a beautiful life. And I hope that if you're new, you know, maybe we can help you with that. Lynn?
Hey, Lynn, alcoholic. Hi, you guys. Loved it again. I like that you reiterated about, you know, expectations, and that this is all cutting me off from the sunlight of the spirit, and that I will default to drinking if I stay at that that uncomfortable state. I'm just looking at my notes here. There were a couple of things. One is, and I may have brought this up before, so having done a fifth step and having seen new things that, and I thought I had kind of looked at this before, but seeing where I'd stepped on the toes in the past, and it had led to behaviors now where I thought I was, God, why would anybody ever be mean to me because I'm super nice? But anyway, but I can see all those things. What disturbs me right now, and it doesn't promise that I'm going to be immediately free of these things, right? So that, you know, but there is this part of me that thought self-knowledge, even in the, you know, would kind of fix these things. And while it's expanded things for me, let me have some more compassion and looking from the other side. I still have some of the resentments. Is that normal? Number one, I think it's normal, but it's still there, and that bothers me. And you also talked about the different fears. You had the two that really stood out to me, but I didn't get the others, were that for me, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, and I didn't know what the other ones were. Because is that kind of what we're baking it down to? Is those fears?
Those are just general: abandonment, rejection, betrayal, disrespect, and authority. Those are the big ones. Okay. Categorically, almost everything falls into one of those five.
Okay.
I don't think that resentment goes away, even though I've written inventory. It becomes something that is always somewhat there, but slowly, like they say, wherever there's hysterics, there's historics. Wherever I have an emotional response, I have history. But what happens through this process is I start to see it differently. I start to see the people who offended me were also perhaps spiritually sick. I develop an empathy and a compassion for those people because all people are deeply flawed. I see that if you pet a lion and it has a thorn in its side, it's going to bite you. Every human being has a hidden thorn. I become compassionate to the human condition by doing this. By becoming objective, I see that we're all like children, that all of us somehow, even the bad things that people do are done with a positive motive because they want to feel better. When I
Right.
really start to understand, even in the worst of us, there's good. Once I can really, really see that, we are all children under this umbrella of the creation, whatever that is. That compassion, somehow, it doesn't exonerate bad behavior, but it helps me to separate myself. And sometimes I stop engaging in that with new people in my life. I stop engaging. I'm not attracted to sick people like that anymore. I'll help them, but I won't cohabitate with them.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I still want, Black, I want to be fixed, and it's a process. So I thank you.
Process.
Fran?
Hi. Thanks, Adam and Ralph, for all your work. You do a great job. And I would say to the last lady that spoke there that it's just a process of time. And as Adam said, you think of it differently. As the years go on, it just gets easier, and you don't bother about the strength. You don't, if they've been traumatic, you never forget them. But you begin to understand maybe where they came from, if it was a person that had defects or how they were raised or brought up or that, and maybe that person passes away. The only thing I would say is if it was a person that continued to hurt you and you know it's not because of your drinking, it's to stay away from them. But sometimes that's not always possible, and eventually when you do, if you do get away from them or learn to live with them, it does get easier. But my real question was for you, Rodney. A couple of weeks ago, I downloaded the stuff you got in the chat for the meetings that were recorded. And I don't know what program you had it in. The screen had a dark background and couldn't find anywhere to save it. So I don't even know if I managed to save it to my hard drive or not. Is there not another easier way you could put it? Just put it in, say, Google and then YouTube or something. It's easier. Another format you could put it in.
I suppose there is, but I haven't. It's all on what's called OneDrive. And so
yeah, and that's how OneDrive works.
That's where it's stored right now, and it's up to you to kind of get OneDrive if that's what you want. You need a Microsoft account to get it.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to move everything to Google or some other drive because it's convenient for, anyway.
Is OneDrive the same as the cloud?
It is the cloud, yes.
It's the cloud. So I've probably got it on there, so I'll look for OneDrive then.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you copy the link, you just got to download it when you get through the link. And sorry, that wasn't a spiritual question, but
yeah, no, I saw that, and I saw the meetings listed, so I'll check my OneCloud again, and maybe it's already there.
Okay.
Thanks, and thanks, guys, for your work again. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Hey, I would like to say something regarding the resentments and them going away. When I moved from Florida to Connecticut, I had my step book and everything here, and somehow it got left behind in a suitcase. Not in a suitcase, in a briefcase with a lock on it. It was like an older briefcase or whatever. I'm like, Mom, I need you to send me that suitcase. She goes, why? What's in it? Anyways, I had her mail me. She wanted just to mail me the notebook, which was in it, which would have been a lot cheaper, but I didn't want her to see what was in my step book. So this is a couple years later. I looked at those resentments. I had no clue what I was resentful about or talking about. They were gone. They did not exist. So that's my experience. Now, for most of my resentments that I've had over the 20-year period of time, a lot of them are just gone. They really do disappear. But I do have some that from time to time that creep back up when I start to replay it in my mind. And I think it comes from doing this for a long time, kind of like maybe a soldier or something, special forces, where something happens, you're aware of it, and you practice what we're going to be talking about when we get to steps 10, where we're aware of it, we ask God to remove it, and it becomes more and more You're like, what am I doing thinking about this? What am I doing thinking about this? But it's my experience that these resentments could be gone, boom, like not exist anymore. Like the 10-step promises talk about with relationship to alcohol. Because when I sent for that book, I was like, oh my God, what was I thinking about? What was I thinking about? And which is very powerful because like it happened. It was my life. It was the story I was telling my life. And from coming here and hanging out with you people, you said, well, no. Look at it from this point of view. And the stuff, my whole world changed. Adam, you want to wrap it up, buddy?
I'm good. I think we're done. We're over time now.
Okay.
We'll start with 8 and 9 next week.